So first off, may I present Miss Kate Siegel. Mr. Henry Thomas. I'd like to state for the record that Henry made me look bad by leaving his beer behind the table.
I finished it.
Well, guys, I think you know how this works with me. I do a couple of questions with our guests, and then I roll it out to you guys. So, first question. One thing that really stood out for me with this show is how quiet it is. Like, it just adds to the tension. There's really not a lot of music. And I was curious, can you talk about seeing that yourself and how that affected you as a viewer, and also how it was to film that? Was there anything going on set that, any sound-wise, that kind of helped set the mood for you?
I think it was, as a viewer, it was an exciting experience because I was only on set for half of the show. Everything that happened in the past, I wasn't there. And so when watching the show, I got to be both like a cheerleader for the present day cast and a viewer for the past cast. And Mike has worked with the Newton brothers, who are the composers of the show, for many, many, many pictures. And all of that silence that you hear is actually layers and layers of sound meant to sound like silence. So it's often the sounds of wind or breathing or glaciers cracking or things you wouldn't even notice. And I did another project called Hush, which dealt so completely with sound design. I think I'm attuned to it, knowing what it can do for a project. And I think it is very smart that you picked up on that Hill House is intentionally quiet, and I think it adds to dread.
Yeah, it's also, I think, part of the storytelling aspect that Mike Flanagan is so very good at is layering this kind of overwhelming tension that sort of builds and carries through the whole show. Like there's an undercurrent of tension through both timelines. And what this does is it allows the audience to be brought in without the cheap thrills of, the go-to knee-jerk, like jump scares and things like that you see in my opinion, less virtuous aspects of the genre. I'll say that. Was that kind enough? Was that kind
enough? So, kind of piggybacking off of that, the other thing that I thought was really unnerving and so well done with this was in the background, all the hidden things. Like, there's literally dozens now of articles online, like, did you see this ghost? Did you see this? How was that? Were you aware of that going on, or did they just not tell you as it was happening, or just to add to the weirdness?
We were aware, but, it's kind of that thing where, as an actor, you're invested in like this family drama that you're making, and so it was always like we would get ready to shoot the first scene, the first shot of a scene, and the AD, the assistant director would say, "Oh, wait, hold the roll. We're going to address some ghosts." And you'd be like, "Okay, well, what is this scene about? It's about the ghosts? Is it about us?" Of course,
ghosts were earnest.
It was about the ghosts.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it has to do with the fact that Mike is a horror fan, and he was like, "What would be cool? There are ghosts here." And he's like, "And I'm the boss, so I'm gonna put some ghosts here."
Some ghosts. And there were a lot of ghosts like hanging out on set by the craft service where you get coffee and snacks.
The weirdest was
see
the
these
burnt
people.
guy, and like he'd hang out with the kids.
Yeah.
And none of the adults, like we were all too scared. It was real scary in person. It was very, very well done. But the kids were like, "This is so cool!" And so you walk around a corner, and it was this tall, gangly, burnt monster with like Violet and Julian. Just like, it was very disturbing.
Or there's this Russian like dancer lady who was like actually very attractive, except when she was a ghost, like her face was falling off. She was always a girl. So that was mildly upsetting every day for me.
I'm sorry, the ghosts weren't attractive enough for you. Hashtag ghosts too.
Ghost too. Hashtag ghost too.
Poltergeist, correct? Is that what we're
Yeah.
So, the thing, I keep thinking about that now. The theme that really stood out for me in this, like you said, this was a family drama, and the raw nerve of a family, we saw something sort of similar in Hereditary, but this is a full series, and each character has sort of their own trauma in it. And it was like the raw nerve exposed of a family in turmoil, that there's stuff going on. And each character has like their own trauma, something that, and I loved how they wove that in. Can you talk about that aspect of the show and how, I mean, you as the father and you as the grown daughter dealing with this, like your character just had so much. Can you talk about that?
I think it was a real gift to be given such meaty character development within a horror show. As somebody who has been a final girl and who has done a few different horror pieces, oftentimes what you have to work with is the sketch of a woman and then the circumstance she's in. And what was given to me with Theo was a fully fleshed out woman and the sketch of the circumstance. And that was a gift because I was able to bring a real person on the day and then kind of work with this idea that my sister, what Elizabeth Reeser would bring or what Victoria would bring, we all had these full family feelings that we all have. Either our parents were present, or they were too present, or they weren't present enough, or our siblings were too annoying, or we were all too close and we all went out in the world and we felt lonely. And it was so relatable to me that by the time we got to the scary stuff, to the ghosts, to the house, it was already done, and that it made it so much more livable. It made it sustainable for 10 episodes as opposed to a 2-hour horror movie.
And I think for much of the story, you know, the house is kind of the metaphor for the family, and the red room is a metaphor for sort of this Valhalla or paradise or utopia or this unattainable thing, or maybe adversely like the worst aspect of things that we're all kind of drawn to, like moths to a flame. But often people say, well, every character had something in the red room except Hugh. He didn't have a red room, but Hugh's red room was actually getting into the red room, you know. Hugh's thing was that he could fix everything, and that's how he established his control, and the red room was something that he couldn't fix. And you know, that was his treehouse, that was his dance room, that was his video games. So it's really interesting, and to have that, like Kate said, to have that structure supporting your character in a horror, quote unquote horror genre piece was incredible for, I think, all of the cast. As actors, it gives you a lot of depth, and I think audiences respond to that, right? Like people generally became invested in these characters, and that's something that generally in the horror genre we throw out at Act 3, you know, then we spend at least an act building them, and then we just rip them to shreds, sometimes nonsensically in the second act. but always by the third act.
Henry's been really mad at the horror genre today for some reason. Other movies are terrible.
I'm not mad. I'm just pointing out a couple of things, glaring things.
It's cool because I don't know if you know this, but this is a room full of horror fans. So like they like these. Into the room.
I didn't come here to roll over like France in World War II. Sorry, French people.
It's also a French guy.
Sorry, French horror fans.
Sorry, Alexander. All right, guys, so on that note, we're going to pass it out to the audience. So raise your hand, and my lovely bearded co-host here will bring you a microphone. You can take mine.
Hi, I love you. Hi, I love you.
See, you're nice.
Very scary.
Not yet.
I think it was episode 6 that had the single shot that was really long. What was it like filming that? Like, was it difficult, or did everyone kind of move together well?
That was it was probably the most challenging experience I've had as an actor, in the sense that in TV there is a sense that you just need to get it right once. You have 5 or 6 takes, you can work your way into it, you can get used to it. But that's a 17-minute shot, and so around minute 13, you can feel everyone's buttholes start to clench. Because we're all looking at each other like, don't fuck this up for me. And it was, I think, especially in those fight scenes, it added to it, because you're like, don't mess this up, Jared! But we rehearsed it like a play. We were given the opportunity to watch the camera crew and the lighting and the set decorators came in months earlier and were running it with stand-ins for a long time. And then when the actors showed up, we got to watch videos of what it was going to look like. And that was both intimidating and helpful.
Yeah, it was kind of like, it was like learning a dance routine, sort of, in the early phases where you were just working out the technical beats, because, everything was filmed. There were four 17 to 22 minute cuts in the whole episode. So we rehearsed, each one of those like a one-act play, basically, and a lot of it, all of it was done by one camera operator with a Steadicam on a rig and a harness with a gyroscope thing, so it stays steady. And he had to do such a technical dance that we had to kind of build on his moves. So the whole thing was an ensemble piece involving the entire crew in a much more intimate way than is normal on a television show. But I'm so proud of that episode. I didn't have a lot of heavy lifting in that episode. Like, we had a lot of dance moves, Carla and I, but the adult cast, had like Shakespearean monologues to deliver.
I also found out I was pregnant halfway through shooting that episode.
Which is always fun, right?
So it was great in a lot of ways. But Theo falls down in that episode, and I had spent an entire day falling down the day before I found out. And Mike, who is the director and also my husband, I had come to him and I'd been like, surprise! And we both kind of looked at each other, and the next day he was like, and we weren't telling anyone, obviously it's very, very early. He's like, maybe we just don't rehearse that part at all, and she could just trip. And I was like, she can't trip, she has to fall down, it's in the scene. And so for me, that added, because everybody, all of the adults in that scene have huge secrets. And for me, it was this double bonus that I had a huge secret in that moment. And so whenever I got lost, I was just like, haha, Nanny, I'm pregnant. Follow me. And then I had the baby, and she was fine, even though I fell down a bunch, and then we named her Thea. Yeah, she's really cute.
Hi, Michael. I flew down here from Naval Station Everett in Washington State to be here, and then this is for Kate.
Yeah.
First off, I want to say that your monologue to Shirley in episode 8 was probably one of the most emotional and well-written dialogue pieces in the series. And my question is, what was your mental process that you went through in order to prepare yourself for that monologue, that speech about feeling nothing once you touched your sister and you just felt that empty death?
Yeah, I've been pretty open with the fact that I've struggled with anxiety and depression most of my life, and so the experience of the nothing, thank you, never-ending story, has always been close to me. I find that pretty accessible. I fight against it for most of my life, and with the help of friends, therapists, and medication, I have kept it at bay. But as an actor, that, for me, it doesn't serve me. When I'm in my depressive place, I don't feel creative, I don't feel open, I don't feel vulnerable, which Theo was in that moment. And so I spent some time thinking about it. And then at some point it occurred to me that it's an actable moment. None of us know how we would behave if our sister died and then her ghost showed up and then we're going back to our haunted house where our dead mother might be trapping us in a crazy room. There's no one who's gonna go, that happened to me, that's not how I reacted. And so that gave me a sense of freedom because it could be anything. If I had laughed my way through that monologue, it could have been okay. And it was a freedom that I don't often feel in my life. I know a lot of us have that voice in our head that judges us. It's like, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. And so I just was like, hey, sit down for a second, voice. And I took this beautiful monologue that was written and I just memorized it cold, meaning I didn't try to learn any of the emotional roller coaster of it. I just learned the words rote, as if I was memorizing the Declaration of Independence. And then on the day we were shooting it, and it was on the side of the road at 2 in the morning, and there's all the pressure of you don't want to embarrass yourself as an actor, and for me it was my first series regular, which means my first lead in a show. So I had a lot of pressure where I was like, don't fuck this up, this is your big moment, you've wanted this forever. And I just kind of took a second, and I let all those feelings in, because I normally try to put up a jokes front, and be a pleasant person to work with, so I just let it all go, and I was like, what if you were just whoever you are in this moment, and then say the words you know? And the take they used in the show was that first take. I did it twice. What happened was I did the whole thing, and Mike came up to me and he said, that was brave, and that was honest, and it was real. You said, what if that is what mom feels, not felt? And he was like, you put her in the present tense, which is a problem because she is dead past tense. And he was like, we need to do another one so we can get the right word. And I literally was like, fuck! And so I did it again, and it wasn't as good. And if you go back and watch it, I put what mom feels in the present tense, because I think it's really hard when you touch that level of vulnerability to go back there, because you're trying to recreate this thing, and you're like, oh, I like to my voice cracked on this one thing, or I want to create the brush stroke, and da-da-da-da. But I just tried to be there. I think I would argue that everyone in this room has been there, and so I just tried to go there and then not plan it.
Hi, I think the show's fantastic, by the way.
What?
No, but yes, I'm curious about what it's like knowing that you're playing half of a character and how you get into that headspace. And at any point in time, did you ever convene with the other half of your character to discuss kind of how you were really getting into that role and how you were playing those parts?
Yeah, but you're never playing half a character. You're playing a character at a certain time. So the back and forth was, who is this guy before the events that change him, and who does he become? So where does he need to be to become who you're going to be playing, right? That was the conversation. Who is Hugh before he sees this horrible evil and knows he can't change anything about it? He just has to do the best he can to keep everything else at bay, right? Because that's a very different person than the person who ends up doing that, right? So it was great to be working with Tim Hutton, who is, a very feely guy who wanted to know how Hugh felt, and we had a lot of conversations about Hugh's feelings. And we went to the aquarium together, and we watched the dolphin show. We said, I think this was good. This was a good moment for us. I can kind of see Hugh now, can you? Yeah, I can see him too. The rest was like clockwork.
So I think Satan has a question.
Oh, thank you.
Let Satan speak.
I'm actually the Antichrist.
You're wondering when you'd show up.
Well, my name is Paris. I love the show. I thought it was really compelling. It holds like a special place in my heart. I felt like each character dealt with a representation of grief. And as being in that show and then watching it back, how did you connect with that representation of grief? Did you connect with it with your own character? Did you connect with it with another character that you acted with? Did you kind of feel the same way as you did as your childhood counterpart as well? So that's kind of something that I thought would be cool to ask you guys.
Yeah.
And thanks for coming to Indianapolis.
It's cool here.
And welcome to you.
Thanks very much for having us. And thanks for watching the show and being such fans of the show, because, you make these things and throw them out there, and it's kind of like sending your kids off to school for the first time.
We can't park in the loading zone.
You don't really know, and especially with like streaming, who knows who's watching it, when and where. Netflix keeps all this stuff secret. As an actor, well, unless you're in with the top brass. I'm like over here at the burrito stand going, really, you saw it? That's cool. Pretty good, you remember me?
Like you're that Timothy Hutton guy.
What happened to your eyes?
Oh my God, they hate your contacts so much. So, we're sorry about that.
I actually thought he was a ghost when he first showed up.
Wow.
I was like, what the hell's up with
The entire flashback cast wore contacts to match the modern timeline cast, but
I don't know who told you
I got
that.
called
That's
out.
not true.
I got called out. I was the only one. They didn't bother the kids.
No. Sorry, to answer the Antichrist question. I've heard this theory of grief. It's brilliant. We had no idea. It's one of those things where when people come back, we go, yes, as anger. I felt many of this, but I think oftentimes it is like the writing it was there, we just didn't see it. And it took the viewer to be like, did you guys know you were doing this thing? And that's why it's such a conversation when we talk about how important it is to be able to come here and talk to the people who've seen the show. You guys often know more about it than we do, because we're really close up to it. And we're there every day, and we're fighting with each other, and we're drinking coffee with each other at craft service, and we're having dinner. We don't quite see what we're doing. It's a Picasso effect. And then when you get to talk to people and they can remind you what it is, like what the clockwork did, that is really satisfying. And so yes, we all had an eye on grief and how you play grief, and I think you do it the same way you do it when someone asks you to cry in a scene. What you do is you just focus on not crying, right? And when you're trying really hard not to cry, that's more interesting than trying really hard to cry. And so for Theo, it was just always trying not to grieve, which made her this like really weird, spiky marshmallow. It was just like gross in retrospect, like just so obvious. And everyone approached it differently. Like I know Victoria approached it differently than Tim did, than Ollie did. But that combined created the full portrait of grief, which I think is what Mike had in mind. Thank you.
I've got your hand raised, please, and...
I've got a question right behind Sandy here.
There you go.
Theo was my favorite character by far. You guys really touch on a lot of heavy emotional topics in the series. My question to you is, dealing with all these really heavy emotional topics, I binge watched the whole thing like almost in one day. And I felt really heavy after watching so much of it in one day. I can't help but think about how heavy you guys must have felt dealing with all of this really serious emotional topics.
Yeah, I think it ripped me apart. Sorry, there should be a charming answer to that. No, I don't have one for that. Yeah, I think it ripped me apart. I had to take a long break afterwards. And it wasn't, there are actors who successfully think the thoughts of the character and get really into the Stanislavski, which is a guy who said, like, you have to become the person to act the person. That's not the way it works for me specifically. But it leaks. Hill House leaked in a lot of us. And we were there for 9 months. We were in Atlanta in a place that we didn't know well. We didn't know each other that well. I mean, there were those of us that had worked together on other smaller shows, but never with such depth. And the show leaked in all of us because we were required to have such intimacy with each other very quickly without knowing each other very well. And then when people would start to behave like humans, it would be like, no, stop it. You need to be this person for me, and I've created this world around you. And I think that's our job. I think it's my job to not worry about the aftercare. I get involved in the scene, I get involved in the character, and then I know that I will need X amount of time after the project to cuddle and pet and talk and hold. And I don't know how much that will be, but for me it took almost a year to come back and to feel safe again, to go back onto a set, because I think it ripped me up in a way that I didn't expect it to.
Yeah. No, I mean, I could lay a bunch of heavy shit on you, but...
Do it!
We're here for heavy shit.
They're here for it.
No, I mean, Hill House was a crazy commitment for a lot of people. Like me, I lost my father during the production. I was filming on the day that he died. I left, I went to his funeral, came back, did the rest of the show. It doesn't stop, you know, like you gotta go to work. And you know, it's kind of a bizarre parallel that the show is resonating so much with people about the 7 stages of grief and all of this, because you know, like I was I was right in the midst of it. It had nothing to do with what my character was going through, but you know, your life exists at the same time, and your work does bleed into your life, just like any job. You know, if you go to work and you come home, you bring a little bit of that with you. So, yeah, it was. I think it made me feel really good and really optimistic about humanity that the show resonated so well with audiences, because I wasn't sure if people would get it because of the timing. It was so methodical and purposeful in its pace, but that pace isn't what you see normally. It's not a pace that you feel when you turn on a show, and I was worried that people would not be invested. But I think it's a testament to our great cast and our wonderful writer and director and showrunner, Mike Flanagan, that we were able to make a compelling family drama that was wrapped in a cloak of horror. You know, it's great. Thanks for watching.
Hi, my name is Kate. I'll see you later. I was wondering what it felt like to work on Gerald's game together and Hill House, since you're in like similar but like reversed roles. I'm just wondering like what that felt like.
Well, I think it's fun. Like, it's so much fun to play like different characters. I mean, that's why, you know, I got into this. I like being other people rather than myself. So it's more fun. No, but I mean, I think it's wonderful to have that opportunity to work with people in different characters, because it makes you feel like you're in an ensemble again, and you're changing roles, and it's a real collaborative thing.
I think it's also true that actors have the same opinion of actors that you guys have. Like, we think everyone else is a freaking weirdo. And we're like, what are you gonna do? And like, who are you? And oh, you're so famous, and I loved you in this thing. Like, I remember fangirling out to Carlo Gugino and being like, True Beverly Hills is amazing! And so when I would see like that Henry Thomas is involved, knowing that we work together, it's actually quite a relief. We don't carry this kind of like, isn't it weird that I'm now your daughter even though I was your wife and this other thing and da da da. It's more like, oh, thank God you're not gonna fuck this up.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's also like, you know, you work with somebody, you feel good about working with them. It's one less thing to worry about, because there are a lot of moving parts, and there are like 800 things to think about on the day. So it's great to not, you know, to only have 799 things to think about.
So you're saying you have 99 problems, but a Kate ain't one?
All right, I know there we go, right in the middle.
I know this panel is about a haunting on Hill House, but Hush is actually one of my favorite horror movies. And I know that it's a mostly quiet movie, and there's very few words in it, and I was just wondering, like, what was the most hard scene to film in that movie?
This is going to be an unsatisfying answer, and I apologize. There is a scene where I'm supposed to like bolt out from underneath the house, and I'm supposed to run very fast. I do not run very fast. And frankly, I don't run at all. Working out is not a thing that I'm great at. And so the first time I did it, I like ran from under the porch to right before he shoots the tree. And Mike goes, cut. And there is this horrifying silence. And everyone's just kind of looking at each other. And I'm like, I did acting. I was so good at my job. And Mike walks up to me slowly and he kind of pulls me aside. And he was like, is that how you run? And I was crestfallen because it was. I really was trying my hardest. And I had to do that like maybe 20 times because I could not run like a human being. It looks, even in the movie as you watch it, I look like I'm running in slow motion, even though I'm running as fast as I can. And I'm sweating thinking about it. So that was the hardest thing for me to do. It wasn't. I just like throw my body in the dirt. It's like a Muppet. I can't do it. She's supposed to be like sprinting for her life, and it's like a fun for a casual stretchy job. It's like you hear the Bionic Woman theme in your head.
We got a hand raise. I saw somebody. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, she's gonna make up a question. You get it, girl.
Hi. My question is, what part of the show, either viewing it or creating it, did you find most unsettling? Was there a specific scene that's either scary or uncomfortable to do?
I loved it in episode 6 when Henry and Carla were upstairs and she kept appearing at different points in the house and she's like, I had the strangest dream. And the way that they did that, I found that whole second section of episode 6 felt like a perfect short film to me about a nightmare, about a woman who sleepwalks, and I loved that.
Yeah, I just really enjoyed seeing the whole second half of the story that I wasn't a part of in terms of as an audience member. It was so fun because I wasn't there on those days, so you know, when you work on something over the course of 9 months, especially in this case, because in the flashback cast, we were shooting different versions of episode 1 for like 3 months. So I felt very disconnected to the rest of the story until I saw the finished product all put together, you know, and it's really, that's one of my favorite parts of working on something like this where there is an ensemble cast and it's 2 different timelines. Originally there was another timeline that was in there with like Poppy Hill and the Hills, and so it was kind of confusing because you come in 3 days a week or something and you feel like you're always in the same wardrobe. And then you see the show and it's dynamic and yeah, it's exciting. It was a great project to work on.
Yeah, there was this wonderful thing that happened, which was because the first, I think it's 4 or 5 episodes, each one is a different sibling. We all believed we were the lead of the show when we showed to shoot episode 6. And it's kind of like what happens at a family reunion. We're like, you all are just characters in my life. And everyone felt that way. And it really was a cool thing to watch. And I'm grateful for the way we shot it, because I shot all of episode 3 before I even stepped on set, really, with my siblings. And by the time I got there, I was like, no, this is Theo's world. And Mikhail's like, no, this is Steven's world. And it really shows in that episode that all of us have an ownership. We don't feel like we're all serving one lead. It feels like we all have claimed a family.
It's also worth mentioning that, you know, the siblings all remembered their parents differently, right? So in the episodes where Shirley's remembering my character, he's very kind and attentive, but when Stephen is remembering me, I'm very dismissive and sort of short with him and impatient. So there was it presented challenges across the board, but it was fun because the tableau was so rich that, you really had a lot of room to play with these guys.
So one thing that I wanted to say, and you kind of brought this to the forefront for me with your story about your dad, and I'm so sorry about that. I started watching the show prior to the loss of my father. And I stopped watching it, and I got a couple episodes in, life happened, and then my dad passed in February, and I started watching it again. And it's true, like it affects you differently if you've lost a parent. And it really resonated with me after that. Like I saw the pain and dealing with how you perceive your parent.
Yeah.
And you think about it when they're around, it's totally different. And then when you've lost them and they're totally gone, you start remembering things in a weirdly different way. And that really resonated with me when you bring that up.
Yeah, well, all of the adult cast, they had all lost both of their parents because Hugh at this point is just nothing, and Olivia's gone. So, I think in that sense, they're already grieving these parents that are still there, right? Or at least half of them.
Yeah, so definitely thank you for the gift of that. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
So anyone else have any more questions? Yes, I knew there would be another.
This question is for Mrs. Thomas. The young actors on your show, they're amazing. And I've been noticing in movies that the child actors are just so good, like Julia Butters in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Millie Shapiro in Hereditary. They're amazing. As a former child actor, do you see that they're doing something different? Not that you're good.
You well.
That's not right.
Keep digging, honey.
I just was curious about your unique perspective, basically.
Honestly, I think it's kind of lightning in a bottle. I think that there are a lot of kids that are very talented. There's a lot of actors that are really good that you'll never see, and there are a lot of great musicians that you'll never hear play, and that's just the way of it, right? Because it's not always the most successful or the people at the top of the commercial game that are the best. Do I think that there's more talent out there now than there was before? No. I think that's ludicrous. I think that people are innately talented and always have been, and it's just a matter of whether or not they get noticed or whether they're ambitious enough, or there are a lot of ambitious parents that are pushing their children to do things, and their children are very competent and good at it. But I think a lot of success in the entertainment industry as an artist does not depend upon your talent, because most people don't know how to gauge that. So the people making the decisions may or may not know who has the most talent.
Do you think it's like a privilege thing too, like parents that have the financial freedom and the?
Absolutely. My experience, it was just like, it was kind of like the lottery, because I got a film in Texas in 1980 that was a Universal film, and that put me on the radar for Universal, which got me an audition for a Universal film called E.T., right? And that just happened because the guy cutting the film that I was in happened to be across the hall from where they were cutting Poltergeist, right? So I got seen.
Yeah, so it's this like weird luck opportunity.
Yeah, I got in with the right people at the right time, and then
And then you were stupid talented.
And then I was stupid talented.
We've all
You know what I learned on the fly, actually. That's what, I mean, I think that's what sets people apart. There's some kids that they are just innately good, like Lulu Wilson, who played young Shirley. Actually, the entire young cast of Haunting of Hill House were fantastic, and all of them were more professional than I was at their age in terms of their technical ability. Like, they came to set, they knew all of their lines, they had everything lined out, they knew how they were going to do it, and they took direction, and they were great, you know, they were pros. And I slacked off all the time. But you know, I mean, there's a level of professionalism in young actors today that wasn't there when I was a young actor, for sure. Yeah.
All right, do we have time for a couple more questions here, if anybody has one? There's one right there with the cute bangs. There you go.
Is there anything you can tell us about the next season, or if you're going to be in it?
I think we can both say that we are going to be in it at this point. And it's based on the writings of Henry James, which, if you want to be ahead of the class, don't just read Turn of the Screw. That would be my insight for the room. Is Hill House was heavily based on The Haunting of Hill House, which is a Shirley Jackson novel. And Bly Manor will be heavily based on The Turn of the Screw, which is Henry Jackson, but it will be also incorporating a lot of his short stories. And so if you wanna do the research and find the Easter eggs, I would say start there. Right. Oh no, I just got fired. Like a job, please.
All right, and I see one hand in the back. Run with that microphone. Blow those locks.
Hi. I was wondering, what's your favorite part of your character that you like the most?
Wait, one more time, I didn't catch.
Sorry. What's your favorite part of your character that you like the most?
Oh my God. Theo had the best one-liners. I never am that quick when I'm in an emotional state, but she was always right there with you, Kevin's a waiter, that's his coping mechanism. I was like, you sassy brats. My favorite. Sure. Henry liked his contacts.
Yeah.
All right,
my skills with power tools, though.
You can fix this. You can fix it.
And we have time for one more question. Anybody have one more? You get the best one of the night. Last one there. Oh, okay, you had it up. You.
So this is kind of a weird question, but so when you're seeing Nell come back as a ghost, when you're seeing Olivia when she's back, when she trashes the forever home, and when you see her there, as opposed to when the older Hugh is seeing her normal, what would you say is her true self that they're seeing, or are they not really
Oh, this is the root of the show, right? What is a ghost? This is the question of the show. And so, I mean, Steven says a ghost is often a wish, but that's Steven, right? And so, I don't think, I can't speak for Hugh, I can't speak for older Hugh, but in that moment, the only time Theo sees a ghost is her dead mother crawling out from underneath the desk. And I think what happens for her in that moment is Theo is incapable of that kind of intimate love, really until the end, until she goes through it with Trish. And if Olivia, her mother, had shown up to her in her beatific Carly Gugino self, glowing like an angel from heaven, I think Theo would have lost her mind. It's not what she was expecting. And so I think at that time you conjure kind of that thing you want. And so much of it, like you were saying, is that when you were playing dad in the past, you're a different dad for Steven as you were for Shirley. I think for Theo, she needed that trauma. Trauma is what guided Theo throughout her life. It guided her to her career. It guided her to like solving her problems, and it guided her back home. And it's about that. It was about the projection of what would get Theo on team. We have to go home. And it was different for everybody, right? So why did Luke have to go home? Why did Steven have to go home? Why did Shirley? Why did Nell? For Theo, it was tortured mom. And she was like, I will follow and solve trauma. And that was her directive.
Yeah, I think, Hugh never really sees a ghost until he goes back to Hill House the last time and never leaves. Because the version of Olivia that Hugh conjures for himself when he's older, the scenes between Carla and Tim, that's Hugh's coping mechanism. That's how he gets through every day, because he misses Olivia so much. He remembers her as she was to him, But that isn't a ghost, that's his memory. So that's the juxtaposition, right?
Well, everybody, I want to thank you for coming to the Haunting of Bly Manor.
Wait, can I ask you guys to do me a favor? Our director, Mike Flanagan, is working really hard in season 2 right now, and he is jealous that I'm here with fans. Can I record a little video for him? Okay, hold on 1 second. This is about to be some nonsense. I'm just gonna tell you all to say hi, Mike, we love you when we get to that point, okay?
Oh, hey Mike, it's just me.